It's time to really start bringing our design file to life and building out the front end of our application. Just like Strapi handled just about everything for our backend, Material UI is going to handle everything for our front end. Material UI is one of my absolute favorite libraries, one of my favorite tools I've ever worked with, and it has really done wonders in speeding up my productivity and reshaping how I even think about web development. Let's head on over to their documentation and talk a little bit more. I'm here at material-ui.com, and they say right here that Material UI is a set of React components for faster and easier web development. Build your own design system or start with Material Design. That first sentence could not be more true. That is exactly the impact that Material UI has had on my workflow. Much faster and easier development. Material Design is a design specification that Google created and essentially is the name for the type of look and feel, the style that Material UI components are based on. We won't really be getting into material design specifically in this course, but it's helpful to know that that's where this comes from. Material UI is such an incredible piece of software and is going to provide our component library as well as a layout solution using a grid system to arrange our content on the screen, a styling system that is directly integrated with the component library, allowing us to quickly set up our styles and customize all of our components that they provide for us, as well as a theming system to centralize and consolidate our most frequently used styles. And lastly, they have an integrated responsive design solution that is intertwined with the component library and the styling solution, allowing us to easily and intuitively alter our styles based on the screen sizes and ensure that our application looks perfect on all devices. Let's come over to the left-hand side and open up the drawer here. And let's go and check out our first Material UI component, just to get an idea for what this is actually providing to us. So let's go ahead and go into the components section. And right up here at the top under inputs, let's go to the button. Buttons are one of the most common elements on the web and is one that we use in everyday life. So we all should be very familiar with this concept of buttons. But here we see the first example of the type of buttons that you can get from Material UI. We see here at the top the actual buttons themselves that are being created, and below we have the snippets of code, the components that they provide from the component library that create these buttons. If we go up to this first button here, we can see the full source for this example. And right now we're just doing a general overview, so there's just a couple concepts that I want to illustrate here, and we'll get into all the specifics as we start building out our front end. The first main concept that you need to know about Material UI is simply importing the components that you're going to use. Okay, so just like we import React from React, we're going to import whatever components we want from at material-ui/core/that component. Now, some of them, as we see in this example, come from /core/styles, but we'll get into those later. If we scroll down here, we'll see the buttons. And here we just imported the button, and now we use the button component. So we create a button, type in between the tags, the text that we want to appear in the button, and you can see that we have that text default appearing there. For the next one, primary and primary, secondary and secondary. So the first main concept is importing the component that you want to use. The second main concept of Material UI is customizing the functionality and style of that component with props. Okay, so every Material UI component has a different set of props available to it that you can use to customize it and to get different functionality and styles from. One of the main props that we'll be using is the variant prop. Many components have a variant prop. And you can see here, they pass in a variant of contained. So a variant, just like our product variants, this is just what type of button we want. Okay, so this is a contained button, which means that it's filled in. All right, to contrast that, we can scroll down. And here we see just plain text buttons. And this is without passing a variant at all. So this is the default style. And here, if we scroll down, we see there's a variant of outlined, giving us the outlined button here. You may have noticed that these next ones also use the color prop. And the color prop we'll get a little more into later, but they don't allow you to just pass in any color. They allow you to specify some of the colors from the theme, okay? And not our custom colors. So we can actually set custom colors, but they have to be in a special part of our theme under primary or secondary for us to be able to access that via the color prop. There are other ways that we can use to specify any random color that we want, but we'll get into that more later. The main takeaway here is just, again, using props to customize the functionality and appearance of your components. So you can see the fourth example here has the prop disabled, which makes the button not give me a hover cursor effect, and it doesn't give me the pointer for clicking on it either. And of course, it does not do anything when clicked on. None of these actually do anything right now, but this actually disables and prevents the click event from firing. So as we go through and build out our application, I'll be explaining the components that we'll need and that we'll be using and the different options that they have that we'll take advantage of. I'll explain everything you need to know, as well as how to expand on that from there and use some of the concepts and functionality that we won't directly be covering. So that means I'm not going to be doing a deep dive into every specific component and every specific thing that those components can do, because that's not really the main focus of this course. If you're interested in that though, and I think that it really does help speed up your development the more you get familiar with everything Material UI can do and all the different specifics. So if you're interested in that and you're interested in learning more about Material UI and how it can speed up your development and all the different advantages, you can go up on the Material UI website under Getting Started and Learn. And you can see they provide some examples for learning Material UI. And under the paid resources, my course for Material UI is the first one listed. So you can go ahead and click that, and that'll take you over to implement high fidelity designs with Material UI and React.js, and that'll go into super deep depth on every single component and feature Material UI has to offer. We'll be covering everything in this course that you need to know to build our application and to understand absolutely everything that's going on. So I'll just try and essentially distill the most important concepts from that course. So that's just if you're interested in more information. So just briefly before we start wrapping up, I want to cover the third main concept of Material UI, and that is the default theme. Okay, so the default theme is essentially all of the default styles that Material UI gives to us that we can use and access from any component in our application. All right, so that's how you can think of the theme. It's essentially a global object that holds all of your most common styles. Not only does it hold styles, but it also provides some functionality for us for things like responsive design. The styles that you set in the theme are automatically applied to all the components in Material UI that you use in your local project. Okay, so the theme holds all the styles that the components that you import from Material UI will be based on. And so this is how you can customize them, or part of how you can customize them and override them and add all sorts of convenient things to it. Just like with the component library, we'll be going over everything from the default theme that we'll need in our application and lots of stuff, and that's going to cover almost everything there is here. But I do also encourage you to go through this page and play around with it a little bit and explore what's here, because a lot of this is really helpful for just knowing that it's something that you have available to you as you work on your own projects. So some of the most important ones that we'll be working with are the breakpoints object, and this provides functions to determine if we are above, below, between, or at a certain breakpoint. And then the keys for extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large, and the values representing the screen sizes that we want to detect. So this will play into our responsive design and how we know what screen size we're at, and then how we can adjust our styles to those. Okay, so then besides breakpoints, we'll also very much be using overrides, which will allow us to override the default styles for Material UI components. The palette object, which is where all of our colors and color variants will be stored. So that's one we'll be working with a lot, and that's where you'll find the primary and secondary colors that the component library is based on. Okay, so that's coming from the palette in our default theme. We also have a bunch of different shadows provided to us, ranging from 0 to 25 and increasing in depth and darkness as you go up. And then typography is another one that we'll be using heavily. And the typography object in the theme contains all the font styles for our application. And you can see that'll provide us lots of different options from H1, H2, H3, allowing us to centralize all of our styles for that, as well as other things like subtitles, your body text, buttons, captions, and overlines. So the default theme really has everything that you'll need for styling your application and doing that in a really intelligent way. Like I said, we'll be going into everything a lot more in depth once we start using it, but this is really helpful to be familiar with. And if there's ever a time when we're working in our application and you're not sure where something in the theme is coming from, or how I knew where it was, or maybe what some of the other options there are around a certain feature, here's where all of that is located and where you can find all of that information for the default theme. Alright, so the last little thing I want to do in this video before we go is let's open up our terminal or command line and go ahead and change into our project directory. And I actually had renamed this folder because I just started tracking the project on GitHub, so it'll be nice and organized for you guys to follow along. But everything is still the same, so just change into your front end folder. Make sure you're in the front end folder of your application. You have to be in the front end, not the main folder and not the back end folder, but make sure you're in the front end folder, and npm install at material-ui/core and Gatsby-plugin-material-UI. All right, we're going to go ahead and let that run, and that is going to install Material UI and all of its dependencies, as well as a plugin for Gatsby, making sure the statically generated assets from Gatsby have loaded Material UI correctly. One thing to note here, I should have mentioned this a second before, but I'm at Material UI version 4.11.0. Okay, and that's kind of important. I think that you should stick to installing this version. So you could go ahead, and if you accidentally installed this already and it's a newer version, then you should go ahead and npm uninstall at Material UI-core and then npm install at material, messed it up again. You would npm install at Material UI/core at 4.11.0. Okay, and that just makes sure that you're on the same version, because they'll probably be releasing version 5 within the next few months or early next year. So when that happens, I'm not sure what they'll be changing, but I'll have to go through and update some things for that once they do. But for now, let's just stick to version 4.11.0 so we can be on the same page. Let's take a break now, and we'll come back in the next video and see how we can start setting up our own custom theme based on our design file.